computers became one of the quintessential examples of modern-day technology. Computers ensures and became a catalyst towards having an efficient, professional, and academic workplace. And these are few of the reasons why do we need to study this black box full of RGB goodness in it. What's up, comrade? We're the Tech 3 Tips, and for this video, we'll be dissecting this computer. As for the parts of the computer, first, we have your motherboard. We have different kinds and different form factors of motherboard. Next, we have the CPU. The two prominent manufacturer of CPU, namely AMD and Intel, is constantly releasing their newest microchip. Next, we have your GPU, or the graphics processing unit. Next, we have ROM, or also known as hard drive. So this hard drive is basically divided into three, depending on what era are we talking about. We have the HDD, we have the SSD, and we have the M.2, a subclass of SSD. Next, we have the power supply unit. This varies from wattage and how do we use it, from modular and non-modular. And lastly, we have the cooling fans. This is one of the most simplest part of a computer, yet so vital. Without this, your computer will overheat. As for the peripherals, we have quite a few. Components such as keyboard, mouses, monitors, webcam, and printer, to say the few. So to formally start the discussion, let's go to the motherboard, or also known as the mother of all the circuitry and parts of your computer. Kicking things off with a motherboard, and though it has quite a name, it is actually easy to explain. Motherboards have come a long way in the last 20 years. The first motherboards held very few actual components. The first IBM PC motherboard had only a processor and a card slots. Users plug components like floppy drive controllers and memory into these slots. Today, motherboards usually or typically boast a wide variety of built-in features, and they directly affect a computer's capability and potential for upgrades. In though called motherboard, it is pretty much useless in itself. The motherboard's main job is to hold the computer's microprocessor chip, or the CPU, and let everything else connect to it. Everything that runs the computer or enhances its performance is either part of the motherboard or plugs into it via slot or port. The shape and layout of a motherboard is called a form factor. The form factor affects where individual components go and the shape of the computer case, which will be discussed later on. There are several specific form factors that most PC motherboards use so that they can all fit in standard cases, such as ATX and MATX. The slots and ports found on a motherboard include the PCI, or Peripheral Component Interconnect. This is the connection for video, sound, and video capture cards, as well as network cards. Next, we have the AGP, or Accelerated Graphics Port. This is dedicated for the video or graphics card. Next, we have the Integrated Drive Electronics, or IDE. These are the interface for the hard drives. Next, we have the USB, or the Universal Serial Bus, or Firewire, for external peripherals. And lastly, we have the memory slots. It is also noteworthy that some motherboards also incorporate new technological advances such as RAID controllers, or redundant array of independent disk controllers, allow the computer to recognize multiple drives as one drive. Next, we have the PCI Express is a new protocol that acts more like a network than a bus. It can eliminate the need for other ports, including the AGP port. And lastly, rather than relying in plug-in cards, some motherboards have onboard sound, networking, video, or other peripheral support. And for this reason, the motherboard earns its name. Next, we have the CPU, or the Central Processing Unit. It is also known as the brain of the computer. The Central Processing Unit or CPU is a unit which performs most of the processing inside a computer. It processes all instruction received by a software running on the PC by other hardware components and acts as a powerful calculator. The CPU is the heart and the brain of the computer. It receives data input, executes instruction, and processes information. It communicates with input/output or I/O ports or devices which send and receive data to and from the CPU. Since modern CPUs produce a lot of heat and are prone to overheating, they must be kept cool with appropriate fans or ventilation system and covered with heat sinks and thermal pastes to control instruction and data flow to and from other parts of the computer. The CPU relies heavily on a chipset, which is a group of microchips located in the motherboard. This term is also known as a central processor, a microprocessor, or a chip. The Central Processing Unit or CPU has two components. Number one, we have the control unit. The control unit extracts the information or instruction from memory and decodes and executes them. The control unit acts as an intermediary that decodes the instruction sent to the processor. Tell the other units such as arithmetic logic unit what to do by providing control signals and then sends back that processed data back to the memory. Next, we have the arithmetic logic unit or ALU. An arithmetic logic unit or ALU is a digital circuit inside the processor that handles arithmetic and logical operations by loading data from input registers. After the control unit provides the ALU with the instruction on the operations that must be performed, the ALU completes them by connecting multiple transistors and then stores the result in an output register. The control unit will then move this data to the memory. To function properly, the CPU relies on the system clock, memory, second stage, and data to address buses. Additionally, the microprocessor or the CPU has an internal bus for communication with the eternal or internal cache memory called the backside bus. The main bus for data transfer to and from the CPU, memory, chipset, and AGP socket is called the front side bus. The CPU contains internal memory units. These are called your registers. The registers contain data, instruction, and counters or addresses used in ALU's information processing. Multiple processors are ideal for intensive parallel tasks requiring multitasking. Multi-core CPUs are also common, in which a single chip contains multiple CPUs. Chips such as Ryzen 9 3900X and Intel's Core i9 1098XE or Extreme Edition, to say a few. Oh, the good old war between the two manufacturers. What a great news, right? It is also noteworthy to mention that the manufacturers introduced the iGPU or the Integrated Graphic Processing Unit. Even in budget options such as Athlon, the Vega were introduced. In a nutshell, a graphics processing unit is a programmable processor specialized for rendering all images on the computer screen. A GPU provides the fastest graphics processing, and for gamers, the GPU is a standalone card plugged into PCI Express or PCI bus. GPU circuitry can also be part of the motherboard chipset or on the CPU itself or the CPU chip itself. And depending on what specific model you've purchased, you're in for a treat.
Hi, my name is Christopher James Olyamas and I'll be briefly explaining what is random access memory, in short, RAM. Random access memory, or RAM, is one of the essential part or components of a computer. So why random access memory, or RAM, is very important to our computers? Because RAM allows your computer to perform many of its everyday tasks, such as loading application, browsing the internet, and experiencing the latest game. So what will happen to the computer without RAM? Remembering where you are in one task, if the PC does not detect that there is any RAM present, it will not do anything with the operating system and will not try to write to the disk. Having no RAM installed will result a boot error and probably some message on screen and a bit code. So, how does the random access memory affect your computer performance? Your computer system memory is made up of a physical memory called random access memory or RAM and its virtual memory. System memory is not permanent storage like a hard disk drive that saves its content when you turn off your computer or system. When you start a program, your processor gives a command to retrieve the program from the hard drive. Once the files are retrieved, the system needs a workplace to manipulate the data and allow you to interact with it. This digital countertop is your RAM. Your system places your programs in RAM or digital countertop temporarily while you're working with them so that the processor can access the information faster and more easily.
Good day everyone, I am Erica Natividad and for today I will be discussing about ROM. ROM is an acronym for Read-Only Memory. It refers to computer memory chips containing permanent or semi-permanent data. Unlike RAM or Random Access Memory, ROM is non-volatile, means that its content cannot be changed and it retains to its memory. So kahit na after mong i-turn off yung computer, the contents of ROM will remain. Almost every computer comes with a small amount of ROM, containing the boot firmware. And now, let's proceed to the differences of RAM, Random Access Memory, and ROM, Read-Only Memory. ROM, otherwise called as Random Access Memory, has some form of storage which stores data and machine code currently under execution. A RAM devices provides the same purpose, which allows read and write of data in the same amount of time, while ROM or read-only memory cannot be easily modified, so they are fit to store the data which won't require modification for a longer period of time. One can say that this type of memory is hardwired, cannot be altered after its manufacture. Let us see the differences of RAM and ROM. When it comes to data, ROM cannot hold data without power, while in ROM can hold data without power. When it comes to storage, in RAM, temporary medium of storage, in ROM, permanent medium of storage. And when it comes to power, ROM chip is used in normal operation of computer, while in ROM is primarily used in startup process of bootstrapping. And when it comes to speed, writing data to RAM is faster, while in ROM, writing to RAM is much slower as compared to RAM. The history of ROM, or read-only memory. The simplest type of solid-state ROM is as old as semiconductor technology itself. Combinational logic gates can be joined manually to map n-bit address input onto arbitrary values of m-bit data output, a lookup table. With the invention of the integrated circuit came mass ROM. Mass ROM consists of a grid of read lines, the address input, and bit lines, the data output, selectively joined together with transistor switches, and can represent an arbitrary lookup table with a regular physical layout and predictable propagation delay.
Hello everyone, I am Erica J. Capua and today I'll be discussing about the PSU, how it works and also the capacity and the watts of the PSU. First, what is the power supply unit or PSU? Power supply units is converts alternating current and also direct current power for the internal components of the computer. It is also Some power supplies have a manual switch for selecting input voltage, while others automatically adapt to the mains voltage. What is the main function of PSU? The primary functions of a power supply is to convert electric current from a source to the electric voltage and current frequency to power the load. As a result, power supplies are sometimes referred to as electric powered converters. How does power supply work? The transformer also separates the output power supply from the main input. A power supply takes the alternating current or the AC from the bulb outlet, convert it to unregulated direct current or the DC, and reduce the voltage using an input power transformer, typically stepping it down to the voltage required by the load. Where is the PSU on a computer? The power supply unit is located at the back of the computer and usually at the top. However, many more recent tower computers cases house the power supply at the bottom back of the case. In a desktop computer case, all-in-one, the power supply is located at the back left or back right. Did you also know that a higher watt PSU can supply more power? Desktop power supplies have a power output rating of from 200 watts to 1800 watts. Amazing! In a high-end system loaded at 700 watts, a 1200 watts PSU would work well.
Lindsay Velasco, I'm discussing telling the function of keyboard and the mouse. PC console can be followed back to the creation of the typewriter. Similarly, as with numerous other present-day machines, similar to plane, vehicle, phone, TV, and so forth, various individuals contributed bits of knowledge and developments that in the long run brought about an economically fruitful. The equivalent occurred with the creation of the typewriter. First was Francisco Rampazito, earlier of the Society of Bookshop and Printer in Venice, who imagined in 1575 the scriptura title of machine to dazzle letters on a paper. At that point, the British Block Henry planned 1683 to 1771 a waterworks engineer of the New Stream organization, which dealt with the new waterway, a counterfeit stream in Britain, opened in 1613 to supply London the crisp drinking water. InfoGadget used to enter characters and capacity into the PC framework by squeezing catches or keys is the essential gadget used to enter text. A console ordinarily contains keys for singular letters, numbers, and inspectional characters, just as keys for explicit capacities. A console is associated with a PC framework utilizing a link or a remote association. Most consoles have a very much like design. The individual keys for letters, numbers, and unique characters are aggregately called the character keys. The format of these keys is gotten from the first design of keys on a typewriter. The most broadly utilized design in the English language is called QWERTY, named after the arrangement of the initial 6 letters from the upper leaf. A client converses with a PC through info gadgets. For example, console and mouse. Info gadgets are utilized to enter information to a PC. The entered information at that point changed over into machine language, so a central processor comprehends the information or guidance gets through the information gadgets. In rundown, PC console is an info gadget that can be gotten away. It is useful and makes our day-by-day lives easier. trackballs, light pens, and other smart pointing gadgets were boundless. At the point the mouse was imagined, though Engelbert supposedly imagined the mouse during a meeting address in 1961, his first plan in 1963 utilized moving wheels motivated by mechanical zone estimating gadgets called planimeters, quoted during the 1880s. Specialists at Germany Franken additionally imagined a mouse during the 1960s. First portrait in 1968, their form utilized a moving ball, basically a little topsy-turvy trackball, which turned into the norm for quite a long time. Mouse doesn't show up in Engelbert patent for the PC pointing gadget that got omnipresent inside 20 years. A PC mouse is a handheld pointing gadget that distinguishes two-dimensional movement comparative with the surface. This movement is regularly converted into the movement of a pointer on a presentation, which permits a smooth control of the graphical UI of a PC. The mouse is a handheld gadget that communicates your orders to the PC by controlling the development of the cursor or the pointer on the PC screen. As you move the mouse, the pointer on the screen moves a similar way. It's subsequently a fundamental info gadget for choosing, howling, drifting, and clicking. The mouse permits clients to switch between applications and select alternatives and fastens and move around the screen with an extraordinary level of precision and smoothness. It is utilized to move between and select connection on a site. Touches on an alternative screen, passages on a menu, and a lot more errands that will be undeniable more troublesome utilizing a console alone.
In monitors, or also known as your displays, the main difference would be the resolution and the refresh rate. This can be summarized in the saying, the higher the better. Meaning that the higher resolution you have, such as 4K or 3840 by 2160 pixels, can give you a clear, vivid display. Well, if your CPU and your GPU can handle the task, of course. Meanwhile, the refresh rate can be measured using Hertz or Hz. And as of the current time, we have the 60 Hz, the 75, and 144 Hz. The difference is that 144 Hz monitor refreshes its screen 144 times in 1 second, whereas a 75 Hz monitor refreshes its screen 75 times in 1 second. This basically means that 144 Hz monitor can draw 144 frames in 1 second, whereas a 75 Hz monitor can only draw 75 frames in 1 second. A 144 Hz monitor gives you 69 more frames to view in 1 second compared to a 75 Hz monitor. As a result, the gameplay looks much smoother on a 144 Hz monitor. And lastly, the cooling department. PC cooling is a major factor to consider when building a PC. This is a common knowledge for many PC builders, but exploring while cooling is an integral part of a build can be useful. As is applied, the basics are simple. Demanding workloads such as gaming result in hardware generating heat. Overheating component can result in performance issues. An ideal setup keeps all of your components sufficiently cool and allows you to get the best performance from your system. Ideas such as positive and negative airflow, what sizes your fans will be for the computer itself, and what kind of cooling will you implement in your processor will greatly affect the overall performance of your computer. Ideas such as positive and negative airflow, what sizes of your fan for the computer, and what kind of cooling will you implement in your processor will greatly affect the overall performance of your computer. And that is our crash course on PC. Let me just address the most important thing in building a personal computer. Don't ever forget the RGB lightings because the more RGB goodness, the more performance. Joke, joke, joke. All jokes aside, always consider your budget and be wise on what parts you will be purchasing. Always consider your upgrade path. And that would be the end of our video. For more contents like this, make sure to click that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. Once again, we're the Tech Dress Tips signing off.
1, 2, 3, funky.